Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to the third episode of our Champions Week. And I'm delighted to say I'm joined today by a man many in our community would consider the people's champion. It is Davie Perrins, who finished second in Sky Fantasy last season and top 20k in FPL. How are you, Dave?
I'm good, mate. Thanks for having me on. I like to think of myself as the people's runner-up.
The people's runner-up. welcome to runner-up week. Dave, I didn't really know where to kind of label this pod, because I think we're going to talk quite a bit about Sky Fantasy, but we are going to talk some FPL as well. I think this will be particularly useful for people who are thinking of taking up Sky. You finished second last year. Have they paid you yet?
Yeah,
you've been paid.
I got paid on the day that the game launched for the new season. I got paid my second prize, which was $5,000, which was very tasty. Nice moment.
You don't get that for finishing second in FPL, do you?
No, you get a stress ball, I think.
It is 50 grand to the winner. It was Mark Wisdom won it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And credit to Mark, absolutely brilliant lad as well.
Yeah.
How did it feel for you to finish so close, though? 'Cause the $5,000 is a brilliant consolation.
Yeah.
But the glory on the end would have been something else, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm really happy with it, to be honest. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, 50 grand would have been absolutely epic. Don't get me wrong. But as the season progressed, I was there or thereabouts for quite a long time. But it was pretty apparent the whole way through that I wasn't going to get away from the pack. And at times I'd drop down a bit and be like 50 points off the lead. And at other times I'd maybe just edge ahead slightly. But it just felt like all the way through the end, the longer time went on, the more my friends got interested. People would hear about it. It sort of spread on the grapevine and people asking me about it. But it was very much like all the way up until pretty much the last midweek of the season. I was like, I genuinely could get nothing out of this. I could come like 6th, 7th, 8th, and that would still be a nice achievement, but that would have been really gutting. But I think to get second felt great because I could have got nothing. Having said that, the drop off from first is massive, isn't it? So the overwhelming feeling for me was happiness, but there's been the odd moment where I'm like, if Man City had just get one clean sheet in their last couple of games, I'd be 45 grand richer right now. That's the painful bit.
So you're blaming Pep like most fantasy managers.
Exactly. You can rely on them, can't you?
I don't know, mate. But that's interesting, that, because you get prizes for third and fourth and fifth as well as consoles, isn't it?
It's a grand for third, and then consoles for fourth and fifth. Okay.
Was that in your thinking at the end? Like, don't finish with nothing. Does that come into play?
Not really, no. I made a conscious choice early on. So I was in the top 10 from December onwards. So I had a long time to think about it. But the whole way through, I was like, look, you got to try and win it, because even like $5,000's fantastic, but you got to try and win it, both because as soon as you start playing fantasy games to be like, I'll just try and keep up, or I'll do what the crowd's doing, that has a merit to it, but you're sort of waiting for someone to do something outlandish and catch you, in my opinion. So I just felt like I'm just going to keep playing as aggressive as I can, see if I can get a lead. And even going into that final week of the season, it felt like, do you know what, I've got a choice here. I could sort of try and play a bit safe and just try and get something, or I can punt and try and get top. And I just felt to me, it was like a no-brainer, both for trying to win it and also for the prizes. But I'd much rather try and finish first and finish sixth than take third. As good as third is, I don't mean that disrespectfully to that.
No, you were first as early as sort of like game week 19 or so, weren't you? But it wasn't sustained. I feel like you may have dropped out of the top 10.
No, I actually was in the top. I was in the top 10 the whole time.
So
from December, like end of December, I went top, and then I stayed in the top 10 for the whole of the rest of the season. But most of the time I was floating around. I was sort of top 2 for maybe a couple of months, and then most of the time I was floating around sort of 5th to 8th.
At what point did you first think I can win this? Because the year before, I had a major jump around December time as well, where I'd got up to sort of inside the top 50 and was on a real momentum.
Yeah.
And at that point, I started thinking of first.
Yeah.
When did it first happen for you? And at what point were there doubts? There must have been at certain stages.
Yeah, there was. I mean, I'm a ridiculous optimist. So, as soon as the season starts, FPL starting, guys, I'm like, I'm trying to win them. That's my goal. But so I'm always shooting for it. But I think with this one, I had a really terrible game week 1, like really terrible, probably about as bad as any serious player could have basically in Sky. And I think we're not always very good at perceiving how well or badly we're going. And at that point, I was literally in my head like, well, I can't win. Like this team, I've screwed up this team because I've had such a bad game week 1. That said, like on the flip side, I think once I got into that top 10, it felt like I had a chance, but I'd been quite aggressive with transfers. And because you got a limited number of transfers, I was very aware that there was going to be people behind me who had a lot. And so it's sort of, you're just waiting to be picked off a little bit. So the whole way through, it was like, I think I'm going to get caught. I think I'm going to get caught. And then it wasn't probably until about a month to go when I was still in the mix. And I knew that there were still going to be people with lots of transfers. Like Ian Parrin was talking about it on Twitter. And I was watching out for Ian because he was saying, I can't win it. But I was like, he definitely, if everything went right for him, he definitely could have. Just like with Jamie on FPL, I listened to that and he was saying went from 1,000 to first in like 3 weeks. It's that thing of like, if everything just falls into place, it might be very unlikely, but it's possible. So it was, but probably with about a month to go, Chelsea had that little burst of fixtures at the end where people were jumping on. I knew I couldn't jump on that, and I knew that if Chelsea didn't really bang, then at that point I was like, I know I'm in with a really good shout. And fortunately for me, Chelsea flopped, and I was able to sort of ride that one out. So yeah, with about a month to go, it started getting serious, I think.
We're going to talk about template a little bit in terms of Sky and FPL on this pod. Sky is a very template game, essentially, although that might be changing a little bit with what's to come this season, because the guys have done some amazing things with the pricing and restructuring of the game a little bit.
Yeah. But
it has previously become a very template game and quite a slog where it feels like within the top 1,000 or so, you'll have 6-7 players well in excess of 40-50% owned. We've seen in the top 1,000 numbers like Salah 99.6% owned and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you go down that template route? Was you conscious that you need to be a part of it, or were you constantly fighting against it?
No, I would say if anything, I was consciously fighting against it. It didn't work out this one, but there was a moment earlier in the season, last season, where I had to pick between Bowen and Antonio versus Norwich for captain. I had them both. Bowen was very popular and Antonio wasn't very popular. And it was just as Antonio was beginning to trail off and Bowen was beginning to really explode. But I made the conscious decision that I felt like it was 50-50, maybe very slightly towards Bowen, but I felt like the payoff for picking Antonio for captain that day would have been huge. It didn't work out as it was. I lost like 20 points. But
so you blaming Pep, but really?
I'm blaming Serge because he said Antonio's a good option.
Antonio against Norwich. I'm not sure Serge has ever said that. That's a very historical one.
Exactly. But I think it's that thing of like, if you've got a 10% chance of getting an explosive haul, it's like, well, actually, if you make that call 10 times, then one time you're going to get the explosive haul. Like, so you might not want the 10% options, but if it's a 40% option versus someone who's massively owned, who's only slightly more likely. I know it's all quite subjective, those numbers, but I personally feel like I'd much rather take the punt to try and get a big jump and get a rise, or to try and stretch a lead, rather than just feel like follow the template, use it as a shield. And I get that approach. I understand it. Like, I listen to Paul McAnulty. I love listening to Paul. He's brilliant. And his approach is template. I've learned so much from how he does it. But my personal approach is basically like, I'm just going to pick the players who I think are going to score the most points. And if they don't, then I'll drop. But if it goes well, I'll fly. And that's what happened in December. I had Reece James, had Son, had a couple of others who really were very low owned. They all went off, and I flew up the board in a month all the way to top and never looked back, really.
So you don't look back on that Bowen moment as sliding doors then? Because for every Bowen versus Antonio moment there, where we could look at it and go, oh my God, if you'd have captained Bowen, you would have finished first.
Yeah.
But and it doesn't mean you would have, because you may have made different changes off the back of that later on. But for every one of them, you're saying actually it was the differentials that got you high in the first place, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's probably a few of that I could put my finger on, and quite a few moments where it's like, if I'd have done that instead of that, I mean, I could probably think of 10. If I'd done that instead of that, I would have won it. But equally, there's probably 20 where it's like, where I did well, and if it had gone badly, I wouldn't have got any prize at all. So I think you can sort of do your head in a bit with like, oh, if I'd only made that decision or that decision.
Well, I was going to say, are you still thinking about it, or is that easy to put aside? I mean, that's strong will to do that and not look back with regret.
I think it's one of those things though, of like when you play fantasy games in general, I've been playing for so long. There's a lot of luck involved, and you make the best call that you can. But just because like it goes wrong, it doesn't mean that you made the wrong inverted commas call. Because there was other ones where, and you can fixate on the things that went wrong and think, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. But actually, it's like, well, I feel like the ones that frustrate me are the ones where I feel like I got swayed or I made a decision that I didn't think was right and it went wrong. Like those would be the ones that frustrate me. But I think in Sky, especially, I did a really good job of nearly always sticking to my guns, making the call that I thought was the right one, even if it wasn't popular. And yeah, there's definitely, like I say, there is literally probably like at least 5, probably 10 things where I could say, if I'd have done that, I'd have won it. But I also feel like there's loads of ones that went really, really well. And like getting Son over Kane for the run in December where Son went really well and Kane went badly. That was one where it's like that one decision easily made me like probably 40, 50 points. So even if that one goes, if I went the other way on that, I'd be way down. And there's loads of those through the season. I think it's really important to just be a bit kind to ourselves, really, and just say,
yes,
make the best decision you can. And if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. And that's going to happen sometimes, some seasons, some game weeks. Crack on, keep doing your best and enjoy it as well. That's the other thing.
It's good. I mean, it's really nice to hear, particularly for Sky, kind of like a fresh take and not hear I battered the template and deviated in game week 35, which is kind of, it's not what everyone does, but generally speaking, you do need to a certain extent, follow the template. I don't think Dave's saying like he avoided Salah all season, for example. Nah, but there are times you need to follow it.
Well, I mean, I would say, I don't know if you need to follow, it would be my only thing in terms of, I think I had Salah because I thought he'd score the most points. I had Cancelo because I thought he'd score the most points. And I think
so did everyone else.
You can play the template. But yeah, you can play the template. But I get it. It's generally a successful approach. It can get you in the mix. But there's so many variations. You know, that thing of like the template is probably going to land in you with like the top 10% of points. But actually, to win a game like FPL, to win a game like Sky, in my opinion, you need to do something different, because it's that thing of like he's spinning the roulette wheel enough times, eventually like 10 times in a row it'll go red or whatever. And you need to put yourself in a position, in my opinion, where you can get that level of luck, because you need a lot of luck. And if you just do what everyone else is doing, you ain't going to emerge from the pack very easily, in my opinion.
I read the record for landing on the same colour on a roulette wheel consecutively is 36 times.
I mean, there you go.
You're gonna lose a lot of money.
Yeah. I just need it to happen 38 times, and then I win FPL.
It's when people jump. I'll keep betting a little bit extra, and I'll make that little bit of money. When it lands on 0, and you start questioning yourself, how are you going to go and play that game? Exactly. You mentioned sway. Yeah. What have been the sway factors for you? Is it content? Is it social media noise?
It's primarily Twitter. So I joined Twitter a few years ago. I sort of dabbled a bit in Fantasy Football Scout website before that. But I had a couple of my worst FPL seasons when I joined Twitter, because I was swayed by FOMO is a big one. Like, you know, people be like, this stats or this info or this player's great or this player's rubbish. You know, they look good, but they're not this. And I think I ended up, instead of sort of just following my line of attack, I'd go down this line and I'd be like, oh, this isn't working, but this person's doing this and that's working great, so I'll go down that way now. And you end up zigzagging, and you end up getting I ended up getting a bit lost. So for me, it's just cutting out that sort of stuff, or just learning to ignore it. I think I've got to a point now where I can read stuff, I can hear stuff, and I try and be quite clear in my mind at the start of the week what I'm doing, roughly where I'm going, who I think's good, who I think's not. And that way, if someone's like, oh, Pedro Neto is a fantastic option in FPL because X, Y, Z, I'm like, well, actually, I don't think he is. There's going to be stuff posted about him, how great he is. I just don't think he is. So I'm just going to avoid him.
Yep. That's Pedro Neto, captain for me, locked in for game week 1. Not obviously. I'm not high on that either myself. Yeah. I know what the answer to this is, but for the listeners' benefit, what game do you prefer between FPL and Sky?
Sky, by a mile, Sky.
Why? Sell it.
Okay, so I would say FPL is a game. I don't like the term casual, but I'm going to use it here for the sake of shorthand. FPL is a game that is designed for sort of easy, casual play, and to be able to pick up, spend 5 minutes a week on it, stick your team in it. Sky is a game for me that's like, really good for people who want to be committed and spend a bit more time. So few key things. The pricing is unbelievably better than an FPL. Like FPL, you can basically pick probably 8 or 9 of the players you really want and then just shove in a couple of enablers. In Sky, you really have to think round it. Cancelo's 11 million, so he's only like 0.8 or something off the most expensive player, which is good for the game, and the premium defenders are expensive.
The point to reference that, just to jump in, like Cancelo was second or third highest scorer in the game last year, and very close. I was about 290 points or something, Cancelo.
Yeah, and in FPL, you know, the likes of Cancelo and Trent are among the top scorers, but they're not priced like it. So the pricing forces you some interesting choices. There's a lot more planning. I think it's definitely a game for planners. Like if you don't like planning, it's not a game I would suggest you play. But if you like sort of looking at the fixtures and having a little think about stuff and strategizing, and there's just a great community. There's obviously a lovely FPL community too, but I would say the Sky community is smaller and a bit tighter. So I've loved it. I just think it's all round. It's just a much more interesting game with a lot more strategy, a lot more decisions to make, a lot more challenge, in my opinion. That's the reason why in Sky you essentially see a lot of the same names coming back, because there's more skill in it. So you're more likely to see more of those skilled managers repeatedly finishing high, whereas in FPL, okay, some people have good finishes, but there's a larger chunk of luck in it for me. So I think it's a fantastic game. If you're looking for something to sort of maybe spend, you know, another hour, 2 hours a week on fantasy and you want to get stuck in something new, I'd strongly recommend it. And obviously the likes of the content you're doing, James, and the guys at Hub, and there's a few others where it's like cranking out great content that really will help guide people through the season. So if they're tuning into you and Suj, I feel like they'll get all the info they need.
Suj is so bad at Sky. You think he's bad at FPL? Suj at Sky. Literally, I WhatsApp that guy in the hour before every single deadline and say Sky reminder. And one of the reasons I say that is you have individual game day captains. So it's not one game day, one game week captain. So if you're thinking, oh, Salah or Haaland game week 1 or whatever you're thinking, it might be both. So I mean, template wise at the moment, going into game week 1 in Sky, for example, it would look like most people are going to captain Gabriel Jesus on the Friday, captain Mo Salah on the Saturday, and captain Erling Haaland on the Sunday. That's not to say they're the best choices, but this is where Dave's saying you need to think about your planning, because then you need to think about future weeks. And obviously you can make transfers within game weeks as well. In fact, that's when you should make transfers most of the time. So ideally, you wouldn't make a transfer on a Wednesday when there's no football. Actually, you just would not do that in Sky. You would see the games go on a Saturday, and then you make transfers on a Sunday to try and get your extra fixture in.
In effect, there's no game weeks, right? And there's no deadlines such, in terms of you just play it day by day. So if you sell a player on Saturday and buy someone on Sunday, you get all their points for Sunday as well. So you have to be a bit canny about when you make your transfers and who you might bring into your team or not.
Yeah, what you've really got, I'm sure Ian Parry, who you've mentioned earlier, will come in and correct me, say, no, James, you're miles off. But I'm guessing that 160, 170 game days rather than 38 game weeks is essentially where you're at. And of course, you will have game days where you've got Leeds versus Nottingham Forest, I know it's a Monday night, for example, and you want to have a captain from someone who's playing that day. I'm sure Dave's already got Brennan Johnson at 7.2 in his team. He's smiling away. Is that correct, Dave?
Well, he's in my mind. But I think I'm not going to start with a Forest player. I've actually at the moment I've done one sort of draft. I've got Awani, the new striker, but I don't know if I'm going to start with a Forest player. I feel like we've got enough transfers this season that I don't need to sort of muddy up my team with a poor asset like that necessarily.
No, and of course you don't because that's an early single game day captaincy. You don't have to start with one of those players. You could wait it out, get the information. If you want to buy a player on that night, you buy a player on that night. And you also with Sky get the benefit of seeing the teams from the first kickoff. So deadline goes right up to kickoff of the first game.
And the other, in terms of selling Sky, you've also got that thing of like in FPL, I've made a watch list of about 30 players. There's basically 30 to 40 players that you could pick from realistically. In Sky, because you get points for tackles, you get points for passes, you get points for shooting. It means that all these other players are opened up. So like for Nottingham Forest, you might be looking at like a Yates or like
I was, but he's injured, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah. But you know, there'll be random players like Norgard was an amazing pick in Sky last season, and in FPL you just wouldn't touch him. It's like all of these, you're choosing from hundreds as opposed to 40 or 50.
So rather than have a BPS system as FPL has, what Sky has 3 different tier systems. So you get tiers for tackles, you get tiers for shots on target, and you get tiers for passes. That's part where all these Cancelo points come from as the highest completed passer from last season. So it feels like you can go down the statistical model as well in terms of having your eye out, who's short of hitting passing levels, who's short of hitting tackle tiers. It's a bonus system that, when they get it right, feels fairer than BPS. Not there's stuff I don't like about the BPS that I really hate, like penalty saves drives me insane. Although I really dislike that Sky award points for goalkeepers who don't save penalties, but because the penalties missed will be awarded points, is still a bugbearer for me. But they have got rid of man of the match, which was a big problem for people last year, because that was essentially voted for by one journalist.
Yeah.
So it might be that overall scores are a little bit lower because of that this year. But yeah, it's such an interesting game. You have to be engaged. Dave's not being disrespectful when he says, yes, the average FPL player can just log in on a Friday and pick it. You cannot do that in Sky. You have got absolutely no chance of doing well in it, because everybody at the top is so well engaged and planning out transfers weeks in advance to the particular day and stuff. So we've got the October TV fixtures will be due out. I think I want to say next week, or certainly in the run up before the season starts, they should be out. So we'll know every game day up till the end of October. People will be planning what transfers they're making in the first week of October, which might sound ridiculous, but that's the way it is. And this year's also different because normally we have an enforced wild card after around about 3 or 4 game weeks, which is known as the overhaul. This year we don't have that. And it gives a really different feeling, Dave, doesn't it, to what Sky might be like this year?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was one of the flaws of the Sky game.
Huge.
So they had this enforced wildcard like 2 or 3 weeks in, and then another enforced wildcard about 2/3 of the way through the season. And I think we're going to talk about it. Maybe we should talk about it now, but it's going to be similar in FPL this season, I think. But in Sky, they've basically said, right, no enforced wildcards. All it is that World Cup. You can have unlimited transfers after that. And for the Sky game, I think what that means is basically you can have varied strategy at the start. You can sort of go different routes. You can try and conserve transfers, or you can go aggressive with transfers. But basically, it will reduce that template factor and make it a lot more interesting from right off the bat. But I think in FPL, I think we might well have the most template FPL season we've ever seen.
Yeah,
because I think
we've got a complete flip.
Yeah, exactly. I think like this season FPL is going to be, we will have roughly similar teams to begin with. Then people are going to wildcard sort of between maybe like game week 4 and 8 on average, I would say. Same data. People are going to be selecting the same rough players. World Cup, another wild card. Everyone's going to pick roughly the same players. And then probably you've got 2 or 3 chip strategies roughly that are optimal. Pick one of those. I think it could be a very template FPL season. That's my fear.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Well, it's a fear, but it also makes me think that actually the experience of playing Sky Fantasy is going to be very useful for FPL.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be a very different FPL season. And again, it feels like the start of FPL where a lot of people are going to wild card early, and it is a choice, you don't have to. Feels a little bit like it was with Sky in previous years, where it's like I have to pick a team for 3-4 game weeks, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. There's no way out with Sky this year. The only way out is the transfers, and what they've done to compensate this year by moving that overhaul to the World Cup period is have given us 10 extra transfers. So you get 50 transfers across the season. You can't use more than 5 in a week, but you could do that. If you really cock it up at the start, you can go, I'm making 5 transfers ahead of game week 2, which acts as more than a mini wild card. I'd say, what's that? A minus 12 or minus 16 or so.
Yeah.
So when you use that transfers, hare versus the tortoise is quite a common saying now in Sky Fantasy. And I think personally that holding those transfers back for after the World Cup is going to pay this year, because there isn't great fixture swings where you go, I suddenly, there's no restriction on the amount of players per team either. So if you want to fit in 6-7 Man City players, you can. It will hurt you budget wise and stuff. But there's no restriction in terms of max players per club. The fixture swings this season is really interesting, isn't it, Dave? Because there's nothing that says oh, that's the massive Chelsea hop on point, or because all the big clubs start with a great start and then they'll go through a more difficult spell together, basically.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I think that's, again, for someone who's played the Sky game before, for those of us that played it for 2 or 3 seasons or whatever, there's a lot to get your head around in terms of just that extra 10 transfers, because it's always been very much about pretty much like conserve your 40 transfers for as long as possible. And people do, but with 50, the door is open to do different things. Like I'm quite interested in the possibility of actually like almost earmarking 5 transfers for about 2 or 3 weeks in as a mini overhaul, so that it's like, actually at least I'm open to the idea of it, because like, let's say like a new Norgard who gets loads of bonus points emerges,
just get him,
shove him in the team. Another like cheap enabler midfielder, shove him in the team, and just get those building blocks in place. Because again, I think a important Sky thing that probably actually translates to FPL as well, get those building blocks in place, that the cheap players you're not going to move around, shove them in those spots, and then use your transfers to optimize your big explosive options, basically.
Yeah, it's been a real fault of mine. Norgard last year, I barely owned, and Stuart Dallas the year before. It's been a problem for me not locking down that kind of enabler really early. But to give you an answer and an example perhaps of how you might consider making transfers, you might decide to start with Erling Haaland, for example. You captain him on the Sunday against West Ham, you captain him the following Saturday against Bournemouth. You may then decide to use one of your transfers to move to Harry Kane. On the Sunday, captain him at Chelsea, captain him the following Saturday at home to Wolves, and then move back to Haaland on the Sunday against Newcastle. And because there aren't massive fixture swings between the big clubs this year, those sort of moves are possibly going to be quite popular really early on, I think, though.
Yeah, I agree totally. And also, just for the people that haven't played before, the formation is very fluid. You only have 11 players, so you could, if your formation is right, you could sell Erling Haaland and buy Christian Romero, and start to rejig your team, get a cheaper defender, then buy a more expensive midfielder. You can really play it about. But yeah, I think those sorts of moves are going to be popular. But I'm really interested in the number of transfers before the World Cup, because I'm looking at it, and like you possibly, and not seeing very many opportunities. Like I'm really struggling to pick out where I might want to do that stuff. And I think what I probably need to do is sit down and almost come up with like if I was to say use 20 transfers before the World Cup, where could I imagine hop on and hop offs for like 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s, all that sort of stuff? Because I'm in a Sky group chat on Twitter with a bunch of guys who play the game, and the general agreement is in terms of like proportion of weeks, and it's like if at least 15 transfers before the World Cup, but possibly 20 used before the World Cup would be the sort of theoretical split of like, if you really want to try and spread them and make the most of them and still have a bit extra in the second half of the season for the double game weeks. My general thing is like this season I was quite aggressive. I used quite a lot of transfers quite early, and that's generally how I do it. But I'm at the moment sort of thinking there's no point in just saying, well, the theoretical optimum was 15 to 20, so I'll aim to use it. I think if there's nothing presenting itself, then I might just hold those transfers and hope for an opportunity down the line. But the risk is that it never comes. And I think that sort of happened a little bit last season, where people were holding transfers for a theoretical, fantastic opportunity. And then when we got to it, it was like Chelsea are a bit out of form. They've not got anything to play for. And then you got transfers left in your pocket. But I suppose that's the risk, isn't it? True.
But then that idea of looking at, I'm going to have 5 or 6 defensive players from one club, which you might what? No. Generally, this can become a thing in Sky. Like that sort of thing never opens up pre-World Cup by the looks of it, where that's going to be a case where people warrant it. So I wouldn't look at it and go, I want to have 30 left at World Cup, because I think the answer to that will come down to what correct decisions I make in game week 1, right? If I make 9 disasters in my game week 1 selections, the 50 transfers and the lack of overhaul means that needs to get fixed really quickly, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So nailing those choices at the start is going to be pretty important, particularly like, as you say, with some of them enablers. And I think there'll be things exactly what you said, you just go, shit, he's the one. I just need to get him in and get it done and free up the funds and stuff.
Yeah. So that's sorry, James, just to say as well, there's an interesting thing, I think, you talk about block defense. I think there's an interesting possibility with that as well, to say, well, actually, if there's not that many great 2-for-1s, 3-for-1s or whatever, just picking block defenses for little 3-week runs almost. So it'd be like, like I'll just hop 3 transfers to Man City defence now for those 3 games. Then I'll use another 3 transfers to go to Liverpool and to really say if those block defences come in, then I'm going to be flying. And I think that's quite a good strategy as well.
Yeah, I think movement between the premium players at the right time is going to be particularly important. I've given one example. It doesn't have to be. As Dave said, obviously Sonny's been converted to a midfielder last year. Most of the attacking wingers, as we'd call them in FPL, if you will, the Salahs, Sons, etc., Sterlings, were all forwards last year in Sky. They've all been moved to midfielders now, which again makes the game so much more fluid and better. But you can, as long as you start with 2 up front, you could go from Haaland to Son on the example that I gave you previously. You can't play 5-4-1, but other than that, you can't do 5-2-3. If you play 5 at the back, it has to be 5-3-2. Other than that, you can move between formations. There are no substitutes in Sky. You pick 11 players, you have 100 million, and also those prices never move. You don't have to worry about that. So Erling Haaland is 11.5, I want to say, Dave.
That sounds about right.
It'll be 11.5 for the whole season. That price won't change. And that also allows you to plan ahead longer. So quite often you have to think, if I make this move, I'm only leaving myself 0.2. Am I going to be able to make the next move? So you are constantly thinking ahead in your mind about transfers. How far ahead did you normally plan, Dave?
So I would always have an eye on the fixtures. So like I say, when the TV fixtures come out, I would always have a little look, see what teams you're going to need a player from or going to want a player from. Although, again, one of your things from last season, one of my things was like, it's okay to skip a single game day. Like if Nottingham Forest are playing Leeds.
Yeah, but I never do it, Dave.
No, I don't either. Do you know what the one, I did it once last season, and I did it, talking about those opportunities where if I'd done different, I'd have win it. I didn't. The one game I skipped was that Man United Brentford one when Ronaldo scored a couple of goals, and I got punished for that. But I still feel, again, I think I made the right choice with what I had at the time. But I need to start skipping more. But now it's like, well, I've got 50 transfers. I don't need to skip anymore.
Yeah, I managed to get around this summer by saying, do you know what, James? If you get there to Leeds and Nottingham Forest and there really is nothing you like, then let it go. But then you look at it, and I think Forest are then playing on the Friday as well, for example. So this is the sort of thing you go, right, I'll buy the Forest player on the Monday. I'll buy the Forest player. I'll keep him for the Friday. You possibly captain him twice, effective 4 games, and then you just chain move him on. To the next one. But yeah, the additional 10 transfers makes you think, oh, even more so those single game days. I mean, be even more nervous to skip them now, particularly the early ones. So, I mean, for example, Palace versus Arsenal was the first game day. I mean, you can't skip that.
You can't skip the
You've got to, even if you go, right, I'm going with Zaha or whatever, you've got to have something from that night, haven't you?
Exactly. Yeah. I think, you do. And I think, like, to go back to it, I always had an idea of like what I'm going to need down the line. So I'm going to need a Chelsea player in 3 weeks' time. Do I wait till then, or can I bring them in earlier? I'm going to need a Brentford player. Is there like a player that I could buy sooner as an enabler, like a Norgard? So I sort of have in the back of my mind what I'm going to want and who I'm going to want roughly. And then I suppose I then integrate that into a plan. But in general, I try not to look more than sort of, in terms of a concrete plan, sort of more than like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ahead. Because I think things change quickly in football, don't they? And you can quickly go from a team that's like looking great to all of a sudden a key player gets injured and they're struggling, and or they prioritize something else. Or even like with Man City, like KDB misses a game and then he becomes a great option then for the next couple of games all of a sudden. So I think I try and know roughly what's coming down the line, but try and leave myself as flexible as possible to make those choices. I also try and avoid last minute. In general, I just try and avoid last minute impulse transfers of like, when it's outside your plan, it's outside your thinking, and all of a sudden, again, it's the FOMO thing of like, oh, Erling Haaland's got Bournemouth. Like, if he scores a hat trick, I'm going to be screwed. So, like, click, make the transfer, done, and then everything changes at that point. So I try and not plan too far, but also like try not to impulse too late in the day.
It will happen certain times, though. So we've used the Forest example, so I'll carry on with that. Where, say, Brennan Johnson does look like a decent enabler at 7.2. The FPL listeners might be thinking, that's expensive. It's very reasonably priced, actually, and as a midfielder in the game as well. So that Leeds fixture comes around, you go, I'm going to buy Brennan Johnson, and then you get to see the team sheet, and he's not in it.
Yeah.
And then panic sets in, doesn't it?
Because
it's not like, as well, it's almost the opposite flip of FPL. You haven't got a week to deal with any information. It's like having that last minute at the deadline where the team news has dropped. you need to make an instant decision. But in this case, you feel like you've got to get someone in, because there's a captaincy and there's another game on the Friday, which is Fulham as well. You think, oh, yeah, I want a bit of that, and that's where the panic will set in.
Yeah.
Do I really want Awoniyi? Oh, am I going Dean Henderson in goal? You'll get that sort of thing will happen. You have to stay calm in those moments.
You do, yeah. And do you know what? Actually, one of the key things that I had started doing last season, as got into the final few months, was I basically would have a plan ready. So, say it's the Friday night Nottingham Forest game. So, right, I'm going to buy Brennan Johnson. But I got to a point where I was like, if he's not playing, I do this. And if they're not playing, I do this. And I was literally had like 2 or 3 plans for every transfer, because there was so much riding on it for me. But also that thing of like, okay, I've got Brennan Johnson. Oh, he's not playing. So I need to make a choice quickly on who I get in. Actually, if I know if he's not playing, I should go for Awoniyi. If he's not playing, I'll go for Yates. If he's not playing, I'll go for Henderson. And you just sort of map out. And I actually think that's a really good approach for Sky players in general, to have something up your sleeve so that if they're not playing, you don't panic into some mad transfer.
And also panicking into a mad transfer that then blocks you perhaps of your next one.
Exactly. You need to sort of map it out. And for me, that's the bit of the game I really enjoy. So I love doing that. It might sound like a ball ache, but for me, it's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. But also, if that doesn't happen, I've got 2 other plans I've developed that go 3 or 4 weeks into the future. So it's fun.
How did you balance Sky and FPL last year? Because you finished top 20k in FPL as well, right?
Yeah.
How did that? I'd assumed because you were doing so well with Sky, you passed that aside and were like, nah, sod it. But you did great in that as well. How did that balance come about?
So good question. I mean, like I said, so I went into top of Sky in December. So it was early days that I was going well, and I was going really well in FPL. Like I got to just the edge of the top 1k in about, I think it was about March, maybe early March, something like that. And I was thinking, like, I could be on for a top 1k here. And even from that position, you can win FPL.
You were thinking, I'm going to win Sky and FPL.
I know, exactly. Honestly, I'm not going to lie to it. That was in the back of my mind. I was like, I can win both these games. But it's like super unlikely. But I was on the edge in FPL of doing really, really well. And Sky was my focus. Like, there's no doubt about that. In terms of where my mind was at, that was sort of the thing of, it would pop into my mind at random times, my Sky team, or I don't worry about fantasy football because it's fun, but at times I would worry and be like, oh, am I making the right thing? Am I doing the right? I was like, not panic attack, but like I was panicking at times, like, oh, is this definitely the right thing that I'm doing? I need to make sure I'm nailing this decision. And whereas with FPL, like in terms of on an emotional level, like I totally was detached from that. I didn't care. And so I dropped away from that 1k in FPL, and I put less and less time into it. To the point where literally I was maybe making, like, in a typical week, I was spending maybe 20 minutes on my FPL team when I'd usually spend a couple of hours maybe sort of thinking about stuff and planning stuff. And content wise, I listened to every piece of Sky content I could get my hands on, and just your FPL content, mate, you were the only ones. So that's why it fell apart, maybe. I don't know.
Dave. Well sold, mate.
But yeah, so I ultimately put a lot of attention and energy into Sky and let FPL fall apart. But I was still trying my best at FPL. I really wanted to get a top 10k if I could. And I went from, I sort of followed Andy Martin a little bit. And I was really high, and then I dropped off quite further than he did, and then didn't manage to rise as high as he did again. So, but I was very happy with top 20k. That was good. Pleased with that. So,
did you play anything else? Was it just the 2 games?
Yeah, last season I played Gaffer. I played that for the last couple of seasons. And I had a bad Gaffer season. I did really well the one before that. But I
joined the club, mate.
Yeah. So I did bad in Gaffer, and then I played Fan Team as well, which I did okay, and I got some money, but not very much. But this season I'm just doing Sky and FPL. It definitely took a toll on me. I think the amount of mental energy that went into fantasy football took a toll for sure.
Is it fair to say that there was a point where you were going to give up for a season?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I mean, I came out of the end of last season just feeling like that was so stressful, because, you you play fantasy football games to try and do the best you can. And ultimately for me, it's for fun. But you want to win, right? You want to do really well. And I got to this point where it's like, okay, I've sort of achieved what we try and do, which is to have like a really elite season where you could win. And I was like, if this is what I'm aiming for, this is like slightly hellish in terms of the amount of mental load it was taken on me, and the attention it was taken from me. There was a couple of nights where I really struggled to sleep. Like, it was really like consuming the Sky thing, mainly because of the money, I should say. It wasn't really about the winning. But then I was like, do I want to play these games? I tried to do really well in it, and then if you do well, it's like
it becomes stressful,
really hard.
It ruins you. It ruins
exactly. Yeah. So I had like a couple of months where I was really struggling to do like really much productive work, and it was difficult. But but I am playing, and it's one of those things where I just really enjoy fantasy at the end of the day, and I think I've gone back to that thing of like, I try and spend less time on it, try and just keep it light and fun, and the chances of having a season like that again are so minimal that it's like, just have fun.
No, I hear you. I'm glad you changed your mind, but I also wanted you to do what was best for you at the time, where I'd said to you, look, just there's no football for a while, mate. Just chill and see how you feel in a month or so. But it's flung so far the other way. You got your own fucking channel now.
I know. Yeah, exactly. But that was the slightly weird thing where I was like, because actually, so Sky was the one I was most keen to play, to be honest. So Sky was the one I was like, if I was going to come back to one, I was going to come back to Sky. And then it was like, well, do I want to play FPL? I've played FPL. I think this might be my 20th season playing FPL.
Has it been going that long?
Oh, it might be 19th. It's one or the other.
I don't know.
I've been in it for a really, really long time. And like, I played it. There was something else before it. I played that, like, and it's just one of those things where I sort of feel like, you know what, let's have fun with it. And the reason I did the YouTube thing is just because I nearly didn't play. I was like, what can I do to make this fun? And it was the question for me was, will it be fun? And I felt like, actually, if I do this, I think this will be fun. So I'm basically streaming every minute of my FPL season. So if I'm on the FPL website, I'm going to be streaming it. So it's not going to be like curated or planned or anything like that.
The last video is like 11 days ago, mate.
Yeah, exactly, because I haven't been on the FPL website.
So what have you got? Like, just like a hidden camera set up, and if you log in, boom, you're live.
Boom, yeah, it's got to be very careful with that, don't you? But no, I think I haven't done much tinkering, and I still feel a little bit like, especially with FPL, just like don't really want to at the moment that much. Just quite happy enjoying the space still and making the most of it. When we get close to the season, I'll do a couple more. But like, some of those streams are literally going to be like me logging on for 2 minutes, making a transfer and doing it. But the thing for me is, it's nice interacting with people. And I just thought it gives a bit of a different insight, because I think one of the things that, we all like listen to lots of podcasts and content, which is fantastic. But there's just that normal, like, what is the life of an FPL manager like? How do you make decisions? What's the stuff you're doing? And for me, I can end up draining hours just sitting there, like, it gets to like, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night, everyone's in bed, and I'll be like, right, I'll do some FPL stuff. And I just end up like clicking around on the website for ages, sort of kicking my heels, wasting time, thinking I'm doing something productive. Whereas now it's hopefully like, right, if I'm streaming if I'm on FPL, the whole world knows about it. So probably in reality, 2 or 3 people know about it. But actually it's like, if I'm going to be on the website, I'm going to be productive. I'm going to be doing something useful, doing something that's actually sort of worth. And if not, then I'm not going to be on it. So the idea is that I'll probably I'll do a check-in on my points, maybe have a little play for the week of like, what do I think I might do? And then at the end of the week, I'll log on to the FPL website again and make my transfers. A bit more casual, really, in a way. But I think that's how I make my best choices anyway. I think, for all the stats and info, just playing on my gut.
We're not going to get Dave on a beach at 5:30 p.m. opening day.
You might.
Making FPL changes, no?
You might. I mean, a bit of eye candy is always going to be good for the subscriber levels, isn't it? But no, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I'm on holiday the week before the season starts with my wife's family. So who knows what's going to happen that week?
That sounded like such a great holiday till you finished the sentence.
I know, exactly. Yeah, it's genuinely. So yeah, who knows what will happen? But no, it's just going to be fun. So anyone who wants to join in is very, very welcome. And like, there's a few of the guys who I know, who have got to know through your guys' Slack channel, who have been on the stream so far. And it's just nice, just that thing of like people being like, why are you doing that? And again, just people be like, well, what do you think of this player or that player? It just sort of makes it more of an interactive experience, which I think for me, given where I'm at with fantasy football, it just felt like this is where I can both limit my time and make it fun. And I also absolutely reserve the right to get to September and be like, I'm not doing this anymore. I've had enough of it. So it's just an experiment for a bit of fun, really.
Good. If you want to obviously get onto Dave's YouTube channel, it's in the bio with the audio and on YouTube as well. He's got about 100 subs at the moment. I expect to log in tomorrow and see at least double that number.
Yeah.
Are you considering a game week 1 bench boost?
Well, I toyed with it. So I don't think I'm going to do it. Part of me is, so I basically ruined my FPL season this season with my second wild card. Everything was going great until second wild card. And then I just screwed myself by putting too much focus on chip strategy, in effect. I made some bad choices as well.
Sorry, mate.
No. It wasn't you. It was totally me. I did something different. This is one of my strengths and weaknesses is when I hear everyone's doing a certain thing, I'll be like, I'm going to do something different. So although I did some of the same things, I decided I'd wildcard a bit earlier than most other people, and I really screwed it up. But basically, the logic of Game Week 1 bench boost for me was like, get it done, get out of the way. It's probably worth, I might lose 10 points, but actually that mental load again, and the thing of just being like, I don't have to think about it, and I can put all my resource into my 11, I think is worth more than 10 points. But having said that, I've looked at the fixtures, I've had a little play. I don't think I like it. Yeah, I don't think I like it. And I might possibly go with a second playing goalkeeper. That's the only thing I'm considering, just so that then if I want to.
If it falls into place.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's a better idea. Like, I do know, and like a lot of people get bogged down with the saving the bench boost at the end, it wastes points. I don't disagree with that. I would just make the case that if you're doing it in Game Week 1, you've got the least information possible at your resource. I mean, there's loads of players from loads of, take the Tottenham wing backs at the moment. I haven't got a clue who's starting Game Week 1. So, I mean, if you're bench boosting, you have to rule them out. And a lot of people are ruling them out generally anyway at the moment. Like, you can see Perisic ownership starting to dip and stuff. But there's some of the cheaper players you want. I mean, like you take Nico Williams would be an example. Do you actually know he's going to start for Forest?
Yeah.
You actually know that Joshua Silva's going to start for Brentford, or Andreas Pereira is going to start for Fulham against Liverpool. They might do a different setup or something. You very easily could be looking at 2-3 points or something. And I think it's more one of them that if you want to do it and you want to get rid of it early, fine, but let it naturally land where you go, oh, do you know what? I really don't want to leave 2 of them out my team this week. And you've got the playing goal kit and you go, that's it.
Yeah,
let's do it. I think that would be, if people want to do that, fine. And it's not that you can't do it in Game Week 1. As I always say, play it your way. I think you've got the least information.
As I always say, play it your way, but don't bloody do that.
No, listen, if people want to do it, and I know there has been some discussion about it the last few days on social media, like fine, crack on. I would just be fearful that you don't have as much information. Listen, you could do it. You could hit, as you said, you'd probably be happy with even maybe 12, 14 points, get it out of the way and forget about it. And that's fine. If that's your target, great. I also think that, as you said, the fixtures aren't great. Williams at Newcastle, Pereira against Liverpool, kind of template-y at the moment. Even the keepers. Like Raya at Leicester, Sanchez at Man United. It's not brilliant. It's gonna. You could go with those guys, and it will fall somewhere better in the next few weeks. I would suggest. That would be my point.
I mean, basically, the thing that really put me off was I think if I was going to do it, I'd have to start with 2 4.5s, one of which would be Meslier, and I'd also have to start with Solanke, who I really don't want to start with, or like a 5.5 forward, who I really don't want. That's $1 million of my budget just sat there. But just to say, on the flip side, the counter argument to that would be to say, you don't have as much information, admittedly, but actually what you do have is the ability to pick players who, to the information you do have, are not injured and not suspended.
True.
And you have that thing of, again, if you could plan up to a bench boost, and then all of a sudden the week before a couple of players get injured, and you're starting to take hits and all of that stuff. So I think if you're like very set on an early wild card, then I still think it's worthy of consideration and a good option. But I am beginning to lean towards thinking I can't see a world in which I don't wildcard after like 3 to 5 weeks this season.
And I think what if you're going to bench boost early, you're doing that. I mean, I would make a case that if you wanted to bench boost Game Week 1, wildcard Game Week 2. I would generally, if you really want to do it. And I think if people want to do it that way, that's okay. Again, you haven't got the information, but I get it. You're absolutely right, Dave. Of course, often people wildcard, I do it all the time, to set up for that bench boost. Shit can go wrong in the middle. In theory, you're wildcard into bench boost right there.
Yeah.
So in theory, that can work. I think, if you're not wildcarding kind of at least 2 weeks afterwards, then surely you're doing the opposite. Rather than wildcarding to bench boost, you're bench boosting, enforcing the wildcard because you've set up the opposite way incorrectly almost. So, and you've got less money. That's the other thing. I look at it and think at the end of the season, you look at it now. I mean, how many good 4.5 million defender options are we all going to overlook? In the opening day, just because there's so many good defensive options. Come the end of the season next year, I look at it and go, there'll be a couple was 4.1, 4.2. Not going to be a problem to get in, which will be better options than. By that point, Nico Williams will be like 4.6, right? It won't be a consideration, so it will turn the other way.
It's that for me. It's the big things: the second keeper slot and the third forward slot. Are those the two which I think, if those two players have got decent fixtures, and if we can find players that emerge that are cheap, that's the game changer. Because if I can park a playing 4.1 goalkeeper and a playing 5 or under forward, I'm happy to park those on my bench as sub options. But right now, you need to pick a 5.5 forward and a 4.5 keeper. That's a 1.5 million of your budget is a lot of money to be sitting on your bench.
And I mean, 5.5s, it looks like Breuer at time of recording is possibly heading to West Ham, but then it's City opening day. Does he start? Would be doubtful. Guess at the moment, Gelhardt home to Wolves, but then that's possibly quite dependent on Bamford's fitness. Another one to play.
Solanke at home to Villa would be the one, I think, if I was going game week 1. But
maybe.
But I don't really rate him, and I don't think...
I don't think you've got to pay that extra, like you said.
I think I've decided against it. But I'm not 100% sure. But I'm pretty sure I'll just wait and just sit it out. I think it's that mental thing again of like, I think so much of it's about the mental load, and just actually, if I can just say, do you know what? I'm happy just to play it whenever I play it. I'm not going to plan around it for the bench boost for a double game week. I'm just going to let it go. And I think it's that allowing ourselves that mental capacity to say it's all good, and we can let this opportunity pass. It doesn't have to be absolutely optimal, because actually it will allow me to enjoy it more. It will allow me to spread my funds more. It will give all these different benefits. So the problem is when you get to like game week 30, whatever, and it's like, but now I could plan for the double game week because it's coming. I've still got it. But again, I'm just going to mentally allow myself to just let it pass. I'll play it when I get the opportunity. What will be, will be.
Nice, mate. But before we let you go, I just want to get your thoughts on both fantasy games. FPL, is there anyone you've got to have, they got to go in? Yeah,
for sure. Well, actually, do you know what? So Perisic would have been right up there for me, but obviously that's now looking like probably not. But he's one who's very high on my list. I would say I've got my things. So Cancelo, definitely 100% in my team. Trent, 100% in my team.
Injured.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure I'm going to start with Ivan Toney in FPL.
Like that.
Pretty set on that. Andreas Pereira, pretty set on him. Outside of that, I'm quite keen to try and get stuck into, if I can, possibly 3 Man City and 3 Liverpool. I know that's not groundbreaking, but I feel like 3 Liverpool especially, everyone's going to have that. But Man City's one where people might be like, who are the other options? But I think I'm very likely to go with Ruben Dias, to go with Cancelo. And I might even go for Ederson for a defensive triple up, maybe straight away. It'll probably be Ederson or Foden for my third slot, but definitely going to go. I just think you can't ignore the best team in the league by not having 3 of their players. They're all quite kindly priced, I think. So, but yeah, and the decision for me is, again, I'm thinking about premiums. That's my big dilemma in FPL. Like at the moment, I'm just on Salah as my only premium.
I'm glad that, because we've had so much no Salah chat this week. I'm glad to hear the opposite. Go on.
Yeah, so I think he's just such a good option, isn't he? Having said that, the Jota injury does slightly tempt me to think like, well, should I be going for Luis Diaz? And if I don't know, has there been any news on Jota, do you know, or is it sort of still?
I think at this stage I wouldn't rule him out of game week 1, but you'd have to think even if he's available, he's not going to have had the pre-season of the others. So if it was thought that the injury was a recurrence of the injury that he'd suffered at the end of last season, therefore they are treating it very carefully as well.
Yeah.
So he was going for a scan last I heard. I'd be staggered if he started game week 1, to put it that way.
Yeah, because if we get news that he's going to miss, say, the first 3 game weeks, at that point I'd be thinking probably want Luis Diaz. But I think Robbo and Trent are such good value that it's very hard to turn them down. So at that point I might go Salah-less. But I feel like I maybe
that already, ain't you, Dave?
Say again?
You've ruined that.
Exactly. Yeah. But I'm at the point where I'm I feel like I'm the only person who's slightly questioning Erling Haaland as a starting option. I feel like he's so popular, but it's almost it just feels like the players are so kindly priced, to put it generously, that you can pick like 8 or 9 players who you know are going to be good fancy options. And again, I'm just going to pick 8 or 9 of them, roll the dice, and hope that the ones that I pick do the job. And at the end of the day, if it's Kulusevski or Saka or Foden or Diaz or Mount, they're all much for muchness in my opinion. And you just got to take that like marginal choice and go for it. So that's where I'm at with my FPL team. Feels
Good.
like
one question I just want to pick out on that, and just because we haven't spoken about him much, we obviously will with Tom Med next week. Tony, I like it as a shout. He's not being mentioned much and be so consistent.
Yeah.
But bearing in mind, we are possibly thinking very early wildcard, possibly.
Yeah.
Have you considered looking at someone else for 2 weeks and then going to him, or do you look at Leicester and Man United and think that's quite good actually?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, Leicester definitely, if they continue their defensive performances from last season, Leicester's a good fixture. Man United, we don't know what we're getting there, but you would think, I don't want to do the whole like he's short, so he's going to be out in the air, because we know that's not always the case, but he's going to peel straight onto that Lisandro Martinez. And I know that he's a hard man, Martinez, but Tony is an absolute beast in the air, and he's got a great leap. He's a beast. I just think I can imagine him causing them some trouble. I just really like Tony. He's the sort of player who I wouldn't, other than Man City and Liverpool, I'd say he could score in any game. He's got pens. He's a really boring pick, but
I don't think he is at the moment, because he's not in many teams, mate. So it's quite an interesting pick.
Yeah. But I suppose boring pick in the sense of like, he's one of those, you just leave him in there. He might not score against Leicester Man United, but he probably will in the next one if he does. He'll just drip those points in. And
you don't want to be playing around with a value at that position.
Exactly
what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm looking at Wilson as well. He's got obviously 2 difficult fixtures in the first 5. But again, they're just players. Are they going to score 10 or more goals this season? If they stay fit, I would say they're definitely both going to score 10 or more goals. And I'd actually say if they play 38 games, you'd think 15 they're probably good for.
I'd say that Callum Wilson definitely won't stay fit, unfortunately.
No, exactly.
It's a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Great. I mean, but he's a great short-term alternative at the start as well.
Yeah, but I might go for both, I think.
Oh, interesting. Sky. Now, there will be some players who obviously are under consideration the same. What's different in your thinking for Sky? And have you kind of set out in your mind in terms of a formation, or are you happy to be fluid? What's the thinking at the moment? Because actually for the Sky players, and if you've listened this far, there's a good chance you are one or are becoming one. It feels kind of, I've not got anything set in my mind yet at all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I've got one player locked in. I probably
really?
know. I probably am starting with Jesus first day. But other than that, I'm very open. I wouldn't say Salah, Son, Haaland. I wouldn't say any of them are definites.
Yep. I would say, so I've got my team here in front of me. I would say very few, I would say I'm absolutely set on, because it's that thing, because the pricing's harder and for me much more interesting. It's in FPL you can get 8 or 9 top assets and you're sorted. In Sky you can probably only manage like 4, maybe 5 really top assets, and then the rest you have to fill around a bit more, that's how I remember FPL like 10 years ago was a bit more like that. But for me this is much more fun. So looking at my team here, I've got Bruno Guimaraes. I think he will be
this do the draft.
Yeah, so I've got Bruno Guimaraes is like nailed. I've got Tony. Not nailed for Newcastle, nailed for me. I've got Ivan Toney. I've got Son. I think those 3 will all be in my team. Christian Romero. I think he's I'm realising
outstanding price.
He's the one player I think they got wrong. I think they've done an amazing job on pricing. He's the one that I think.
When on our Sky FF, our Sky Fantasy Slack channel, as soon as the pricing came out, once everybody, oh my God, these players have moved position, there's more transfers, whatever. Romero was the name the guys were talking about most. Was, I can't believe 7.8.
He's the only one. They basically leaked the price. Well, they didn't leak it. They accidentally leaked the price a day or 2 before it came out. And I actually thought about sending them a message, but then I thought there's no point because they don't do that bit of it very well. But I just thought if they could have raised his price by $1 million, I think like it would have been awesome, because then everyone would have been correctly priced. But so the other player who I think
just to point out, he's obviously very early on, but I'm going to guess 80,000 players or so at the moment, might even be 100,000 or so now. Romero is currently he's in less than 7% of teams.
Is he really?
Despite that price, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. That's encouraging, isn't it?
Yes, because he's the most likely player for me across the board, I think.
I think that Cancelo and Van Dijk are two others that I think I'm very likely to go with. So my current draft, which I've got to say, again, this was one that's thrown together fairly quickly, is I've got Alisson in goal.
So do I.
No, I think he's a great pick, isn't he? I mean, his points,
so solid.
Yeah, his points record's amazing.
So 239 points in Sky Fantasy last year, Alisson. To put that in perspective for you, Harry Kane, 241.
Exactly. 2 points less than Harry Kane for 8 million. I feel like...
Admittedly, Harry Kane did take 4 months off.
Yeah,
but continue.
Still. Alisson missed a game or two, didn't he? Yes. So we've got I've got Alisson in goal, and then I've got Van Dijk and Robertson, also for a Liverpool triple up straight away. And then I've got Cancelo, Romero, and Tomiyasu. But I think Tomiyasu's struggling for fitness, so I don't think I'll be sticking with him. But that's
a transfer way to wrap it, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. So I think that'll be one that I skip out of. And then I've got Rodri, Son, and Bruno Guimaraes as my midfield. And I think Rodri's one I'm actually unlikely to start with. Just love him. He's just a points machine in this game, isn't he?
He really is.
And
which
then
the FPL listener go, what are you talking about? But the guy hits passing tiers every game, basically. So rather than 2 points, he's starting on 5 points. Yeah. He's added goals to his game a bit. He'll get the odd tackle tier as well.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
I mean, he'll average 5-6 points a game, no problem.
I think he's 9.3 this season. So he's
9.1.
9.1. There you go. And then up top, I've got Awoniyi from Forest and Ivan Toney. But I think of those, I think basically Toney, Guimaraes, Son, Van Dijk, Cancelo, Romero. I think those 6 will be in my team. There's no Salah, no Haaland in that team, which is risky. But
sacrifices have to be made.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
This is more difficult, as you said, to go back to the start of the show. More difficult than the FPL, where you can if you want to go Salah, Haaland, and Son, like absolutely anyone can do that. Right?
Totally, no problem at all. And I think with this game, if you want to do that, you can do it also, but you have to then cheap out your defense. And I think there's something psychological. I think about we see like a Salah who could get 20 points in a match. And, you dream of the Salah 20-point captaincy, but that happens, 2 or 3 times a season.
If Van Dijk will get 10 nearly every other week.
Exactly. So it's that thing of like, I feel like I'm quite happy to captain Van Dijk over Salah in this and Cancelo over Haaland and just be like, actually, if you average it all out, you're probably going to come out about even at the end of the season. So, and spread the funds a little bit.
I'll share mine just for the record, because I know this isn't what it's going to be. And I've got 1.3 million in the bank as well at the moment. So I know it's definitely not staying this way. But I've got Alisson, Van Dijk, Cancelo, Romero. I've actually got Wesley Fofana in there at the moment. I think it's quite an interesting price at 7.5. Johnson, I've mentioned a lot. He's in at the moment, 7.2. Rodri, Guimaraes, like yourself. At the moment, I've got Marcus Rashford sitting in there.
Really?
I think it's 8.1. If he could be really interesting. That's very much let's see what we see for the rest of the pre-season. It was interesting. I was looking at his FPL data last night actually again, and his previous last year, obviously he was spent most of it injured, and when he did play, it was bad. I think he shouldn't have gone to the Euros. He was injured, and then I think he was injured from the back end of the last season. The previous 2 seasons, it's like 167, 176 points or so in FPL, and you think,
okay,
if he is fit again, unbelievable value at 6.5 in FPL and 8.1 in Sky. At the moment up front, I've got Jesus and Haaland.
Nice.
So like no Salah, there's no Son, there's no Kane. But then to go back to part of my thinking at the moment would be after City play Bournemouth, Haaland to Son or Kane at that point would be the current thinking.
I've
got Romero there as cover anyway. If I don't
I like that. I feel like I definitely want a premium Spurs asset very early on. So, I could go without Son to begin with or Kane, but I think I really want a Spurs player because there's enough captaincy days for Spurs where it feels like I'm going to want that. And I think I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on this. The whole like Kane in August thing. It's not about August.
Nonsense.
But my observation of Kane is that like when he comes back from injury, he can be a slow starter. At the start of the season, he tends to start slowly. So obviously the August thing's ridiculous. But do you think that he generally does need a few games to get up to speed?
Yeah,
or do you
he
think
always does.
Yeah. So would it be Son over Kane?
But he's having it now. So a lot of the problem for Harry in the past, for example, has been he comes back from major tournament, plays one pre-season game, the Premier League starts. Yeah. So he's played 65 minutes or so the other day, scored. He played 45 minutes the day before, scored twice. So we've got Rangers Saturday. I imagine that might go up to 80 or so. Probably the same for the final friendly against Roma, and he's ready to go. So I think it's a case of that.
Okay.
Training, he's on it at the moment. He's fit. He's had a little break. I do agree. He's one of them, when he gets an injury in January, it's very rare that he comes back and he looks 100% first game back and stuff. But that should not be any issue for him because he's having a whole pre-season. Shouldn't be an issue for him this year.
So do you think in that case, Son versus Kane, would you call it a 50-50?
Preference with Sonny for me, both formats.
Yeah.
Both. It's just the little bit extra you can get, I think, with Sonny.
Yeah.
But if anyone's got a preference for Harry, I mean, I've seen plenty of teams are going to start with both game week 1. I think you probably are booking that you're going to sell one of them in game week 2. It's absolutely fine. There's every chance you'll get off to a flyer. They're both great assets. For me, part of going back to having Haaland at the start is almost, I've got a little bit of doubt as well, Dave, but I think one of him or Harry, in terms of your structure of your squad, feels quite important at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, in FPL, if I go without Salah, then I may well look at doing, I hate booking in transfer, but do that Kane to Haaland and see if you can, because those are games they could hat-trick in, and it's that would be an option. But in Sky, I won't be doing that. But I think I will be on Son from the start in Sky. But we'll see. I really need to have a proper delve in, but I've basically sort of, with Sky and FPL, I think it's still just that slight, not hangover, that's too negative, but that thing of like, I'm just allowing myself the break. And you know what it's like anyway, until we get about last week before the season starts, when you start really getting the information and you get really close, that's when you really start doing your teams. I don't think there's much to be gained in loads of tinkering now. So
completely agree. You can overthink it. I mean, Jed Spence, give an example. I haven't seen him in white yet. Do I know if he's going to be first choice? I don't know. But on that, just because a lot of people are asking, don't take too much of Antonio's comments yesterday about it's a club signing and stuff. Listen, he decides who comes into the football club. If he didn't want him, wouldn't be there. So I think with Spence, he will become first choice. But is he going to start game week 1? I've no idea. There's 2 other wing backs there, arguably a third with Lucas Moura, who are 2 weeks ahead of him in terms of pre-season. So
I mean, 4.5 in FPL seems like it could
staggeringly good.
It could be a gift. It's another one where it's like Perisic at 5.5. I said when he was priced, I was like, if he was a 5.5 mid, I'd feel like he's a great option. But he's got all those clean sheets in his locker, and I'm interested in Spurs defense this season across all the games. Like, obviously going to have Romero in this. I'm considering Dyer in Sky as well. FPL, the wing backs. Like, I think Spurs defense could be a popular pick this year.
Cheers, Dave. With Spence and Perisic, I think as it stands right now, you probably buy in at cheaper than what they are now. I think it'll be a quick, oh my God, I need to get Perisic at 5.3 or 5.4. I need to get Spence, maybe not so much, because it'll probably become clear if he's going to start or not. But even take that to a lot of people, Doherty. But I'd look at it like this. So Doherty, as it would stand, possibly starts against Southampton. Let's see what happens in the friendlies. But I think Chelsea away, as it stands, he'd play Emerson.
Okay, yeah.
He likes Emerson as kind of a more defensive, solid option when he's playing the best teams in the league and stuff, if Emerson stays. So even that, I'd say it could in theory be Doherty versus Southampton, Emerson versus Chelsea, and Spence versus Wolves.
Yeah,
that's the mess it is at the moment.
That's possible, I think, but that's where with FPL I said I've struggled to see myself not wildcarding, because like once Spurs get past Chelsea, they've got that lovely fixture run, and that's where it's like I can't see myself not wanting to use one of my transfers on bringing in Perisic or Spence or both, and it just feels to me like there's so much that we don't know with that like 8 million midfielder slot. I'm sure 1 or 2 are going to emerge, and the budget slots. I just feel like there's so much that could happen that I feel like come game week 3 or 4, I can't imagine myself being in a position where I feel like I can't really shake up my team with 5 or 6 good transfers. I'd much rather be decisive and just be like, I'm just going to do it.
And if you wildcard in game week 3, you're coming into Tottenham, Wolves at home, Forest away, West Ham away, Fulham at home.
Exactly.
Nice
I want
four as
I want
well.
three for that.
You've got the Chelsea game out the way.
Yeah, I want three Spurs for that.
You probably then got the clarity to look at going Kane, Son, or Kulusevski, or the other way around, and then one of the defensive guys when you've got the clarity.
It's going to be interesting for sure.
Hey, Spurs, nicely done. Dave supports 3 different teams, by the way, but really he's a Southampton fan. Talking about these Tottenham options, you've got us game week 1, mate. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be a Spurs win, 100%.
So deadpan.
You just get used to it though. It's like, okay, that's going to be
It was literally the first time through this whole pod. I think like the smile disappeared from your face, Dave. Like, I'm not really looking forward to that.
It's one exciting new season, isn't it? But at the same time, you learn to manage your expectations. I mean, I'm interested. So Southampton on my team. I'm really interested in Brighton as well this season. I feel like they could kick on and have a good season. It's going to be interesting. I think Bournemouth are going to finish bottom, by the way.
Oh, harsh. We've got a rough start.
Yeah.
Brilliant fixtures from game week 5 or so. Yeah. But we'll speak to Sam and Neil and Matt as part of correspondent week next week. That will begin on Monday. Dave, where can everyone follow you on the Bird app, mate?
So I am at Simple Goal on Twitter. So find me there. Say hello.
Fantastic, mate. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for giving up your time and good luck. One of the things for those who are considering joining Sky, one of the things I'll always say, and Dave is proof of the pudding, although he didn't do it. Any one of us can win Sky. FPL, Jamie Pigger, love you, mate. It's a miracle though, isn't it? But Sky is generally winnable.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. That story, by the way, I hadn't heard of anything. Unbelievable. Like genuinely unbelievable that he did what he did. Crazy.
What a brilliant, humble bloke he is as well. If you want to catch up with the pod I did with Jamie, that was episode 1 from Monday. On tomorrow's Champions Week, I'm going to introduce you to one of our advanced tier patrons. Cole Bonzo won our advanced tier mini league, and he's got an extremely unique story. Basically, never watched football until the 2018 World Cup, but he's very good at fantasy football. So we're going to talk about that on tomorrow's show. Just leaves me to say thanks again so much to Dave. Good luck for the season ahead, my friend. Cue music, please, man child.